guys. It's day 8 of Christmas Family Devotions. We've finished all of our Old Testament passages, and now we're moving on into the New Testament, which will remain in until Christmas Day. Today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. You might have noticed that it's a genealogy, and oftentimes genealogies are where people stop reading the Bible because they're so uninteresting when you don't have the history of the family, or if it's not your family, we can easily lose interest. Yet here we see it's the genealogy of Christ. In the Old Testament, you'll notice a number of genealogies. One of the interesting things about the genealogies are that they lead to the line of Christ. And when you see, say, the genealogy of Cain's offspring or Abraham's other son, Ishmael, those genealogies cease in the very passage they appear in. Yet the genealogies that follow Abraham's offspring to Jacob, and then Jacob's 12 sons that become the 12 tribes of Israel, those are the genealogies that the Old Testament continue to follow all the way through. And then what we see here in Matthew is that it hones in on the tribe of Judah, from which the Messiah would come. And so that's why this is so exciting. You'll notice that in the New Testament, there are no more genealogies after the genealogy of Christ. There's one that follows Christ's legal line to the throne of David through his father Joseph, who was his legal father, yet we know Joseph wasn't actually Christ's physical father. Yet Christ received the inheritance of the throne through Joseph. Now, in Luke chapter 3, we see the genealogy of Mary, which also leads back to David, but through a different son named Nathan. And that shows you that Christ is physically related to David, yet he's legally received the throne through his legal father, Joseph. Today, there is nobody that can trace their line back to King David. In 70 AD, when the Romans destroyed the temple, all the genealogical records were also destroyed. And so what we have here leading to Christ is very unique, and there is no one else who can fulfill this prophecy other than him. Today I want to point out a couple of really exciting things about this genealogy, and it has to do with the grace of God working through a really messed up family. When you see the dysfunction of Jacob having two wives, Rachel and Leah. He loved Rachel and Leah was unloved, yet God chose Leah, the unloved wife, to give her favor and attention by giving her the son Judah that would lead to the line of the Messiah. So we see God's grace in loving the unloved and blessing those whom man did not bless. When you read the genealogy, take note that there are 5 women mentioned. This is not a normal thing for a genealogical record in the Jewish culture, because it was usually the men and their sons that were recorded, not the women. And so we see of the 5 women, there's Tamar, there's Rahab, there's Ruth, there's the wife of Uriah, who is Bathsheba, and Mary. Each one of them are called into question according to their character because of various things that have happened in their story. Although Mary actually doesn't have anything in her own story that calls her into question, it was the result of being pregnant as a virgin. People would hear that story and think, oh yeah, right, you've been fooling around before you got married, and it wasn't Joseph's son who you're going to bear, so your son is illegitimate, and that's how society would perceive her, yet we know that that's not true. But if we go back to the first woman mentioned, who is Tamar, she married a man named Er, and he was wicked before the Lord. The Lord killed him. And so Tamar had no children through and there was this practice called the Levirate marriage, where the next son would be given to his brother's wife if he was unmarried, to carry on his brother's line. That's how important genealogies were and offspring were. And so Tamar then was married off to Onan. Onan was seen as wicked before the Lord. The Lord took his life. And then she was promised to the next son, Shelah. And Judah withheld Shelah from her, as you can imagine, just wondering what's wrong with this lady and why are my sons continuing to die. Yet eventually Tamar noticed what was going on. She dressed herself up as a prostitute and seduced her husband's father, Judah. And it was through Judah that she gave birth to the son that would lead to the Messiah. Then there's Rahab. She's a Gentile, and according to a Jewish genealogy, that would not be a positive thing. But also, we know Rahab from Joshua chapter 2. She was a prostitute, and yet the Lord had mercy on her and gave her grace and saved her. Next, there was Ruth. Ruth was a Moabitess, and the Moabites were not respected in any way by Israel. They were seen as cursed. They were Gentiles, and to have a Moabite in your family line was not something to boast about among your Jewish friends. Then there's also the wife of Uriah, Bathsheba, and that's probably one of the most famous stories that you'd be familiar with, is that King David one day, while kings were off to war, he stayed back, let his generals go fight, and he was on top of his house and looking out, saw a woman bathing, and through his eyes was led into temptation to then seduce her, and she became pregnant, and the child ended up dying, unfortunately. Yet David took Bathsheba in as one of his wives, and she gave birth to Solomon, that was the king to succeed his father David. That we could take away from this passage is that no matter how messed up your life is or your family line might be, God's grace is always bigger. And he did something amazing, taking a really messed up family and bringing about the Messiah of the world, the Savior of the world, through this family. He can do amazing things in your family. And it's all through Jesus Christ. If you want a little background about each of these women, for Tamar, you can read Genesis 38. For Rahab, Joshua chapter 2. For Ruth, you can read Ruth chapter 1, coupled with Deuteronomy 23, verse 3, where we see the Moabites are excluded and cursed. And then also the wife of Uriah, 2 Samuel 11, where you see the story of David and Bathsheba. For the family devotion, don't forget to do an Advent calendar or something fun with the kids. And that first question, what is your favorite Christmas food? Just for something fun for everybody to have some good laughs and memories about. And then there's the discussion questions. And you'll notice it says, what is something you know about each of these women? And you may have to explain a lot to your kids, or you might be careful in how much detail you give them. It's kind of up to you as a parent. You know what's best. Then also, out of the 5 women, 3 had what would be considered by their society as illegitimate births, including Mary. Why would God include these imperfect people in Jesus' family line? And so get people thinking in your family about how God is bigger than the mistakes that family members make, and our sin can never overcome God's grace. Well, I hope you enjoyed the study. I hope it really can bring some hope and shed some light onto your own families and seeing how God can work among your relatives. So enjoy your time with your family. We'll see you guys soon.